I don't know about all of you, but I could have listened to Father Malone for much longer as he talked about America's mission and the mission of all of us journalists in today's culture. But I am very grateful to have the opportunity to present to all of you the mission of the Register and some of our ideas about this very important topic. First, a thank you again to Father Malone. Thank you to Monsignor Vicari for inviting us all here to Dunwoody. And Bishop, thank you for staying and being with us for a bit longer. You know, as I look around the room and as I look at the editors here, I think of the words of Pope Francis not too long ago where he was asking for more women theologians, and I think we need a few more women on the panel. To be the only representative is a bit, I guess, intimidating, but I'm very grateful to be here. Last year I would not have made it, so I am very grateful to the weather last year. I was 9 months pregnant and was not able to join the panel last year, so it's been a pleasure to be able to travel. I'm with my 10-month-old son this weekend here with my husband, so again, it's really a pleasure to be here. This year, though, that we have delayed in having this gathering has been a great year because we've had the opportunity to see Pope Francis for yet another year in the face of the media. And what happened in the first year, so in 2013, was very expected for Pope Francis to make headlines or for the church to be all over the headlines. We had Pope Benedict resign, which is a first in a very long time, so that was a natural news break. And then we had Pope Francis, the first pope from the Americas, which again was another very natural news headline. And that continued for that year. But this year, the fascination with Pope Francis has furthered. It has continued in a way that we probably, I didn't expect anyway, at the end of 2013. So it's in light of this year of the Pope being a part of the headlines. This week in Pew Research Center came out with a study that said that he is he is 60% popular. So the world believes the Pope is a very popular person. And this, I think, is due, in fact, to the secular media, the mainstream media, taking a great interest in him and really putting him front and center. So where do we fit in this? Well, I thought I would go to the document that inspired this to bring out a few further points that than Father Malone mentioned. So let's turn for a minute. I'll turn for a minute to that Inter Mirifica. So in the cultural context we find ourselves with the media today, covering the Pope, covering the Church, we can see that he is front and center. But are we able to delve in great depth into what the Church is through the presentation that is being given by the secular media? And I would say if we turn to Inter Mirifica, we see that they are calling for a greater depth coming from the Catholic media than the secular media can have. We can be grateful that the Church is in the news, and we can be grateful that it isn't scandal that is dominating. Yet taking direction from Inter Mirifica, we do well to ask the question, is the information being presented about the Church true and complete? Because that's what Inter Mirifica calls for, a Catholic press that can provide true and complete information about the Church. With the demographic makeup of newsrooms these days, where secular newsmen and women are far less religious than the general population, I don't know how that news that is being presented by the mainstream media can be true and complete. Much of the secular news coverage of the Church is sensational. It's framed around hot-button issues of the day. It's often very polarizing. And most people, though, get their news from about the Church from the secular media. Thus, another important point of Inter Mirifica must be taken into account. That is, the Church Fathers, the Council Fathers' call For a truly Catholic press, with the clear purpose of forming, supporting, and advancing public opinion in accord with natural law and Catholic teaching. Today, the Catholic Church is needed more than ever, the Catholic press is needed more than ever to tell the story of the Church from those who know the Church best, from the inside. The Church needs Catholic journalists who can write by having a balanced by balancing personal belief and practice with professional journalistic experience. Catholic media can provide background, context, and depth that secular media don't often provide. It can show the breadth of the Church, that we Catholics are not simply stuck in some antiquated moral code pitted against the freedoms of the modern age. Our story is not one of a culture war, but one primarily of relationships, as Father Malone said, a relationship with God, with Jesus Christ, with one another, and with all of creation. We can tell the story, the Catholic press, can tell the story best of young men and women who answer the call to consecrated life, although it's nice to have mainstream media highlighting them, such as Lifetime's The Sisterhood, Becoming Nuns. But we, the Catholic press, can really get at the core of why young men and women answer that call. We, the Catholic press, can explain most vividly the loss that results from the Christian exodus from the Middle East because of the conflict there. When I think of the Catholic press, I think of what happened, a secular journalist described covering the Syria, the crisis in Syria. And she said, as a secular journalist, she was covering the crisis, but really found the need to go deeper and deeper into that crisis. And she found nowhere could she get a good understanding of what was happening in Syria. So she created a website called Syria Deeply. And what that website does is delve in depth into the crisis in Syria from all aspects, from various perspectives, providing background, providing history. And I think that's what the Catholic press is. We could be called Catholic deeply, a single subject, if you will, type of newspaper that really provides the depth that is so needed. Catholic media is poised to go further than simply informing. The Catholic media, in the words of Inter Mirifica, can instill a fully Christian spirit into readers. And ultimately, the Catholic press is to have at its core the desire that all its efforts be for the welfare of the souls. And that's again a quote from Inter Mirifica. Father Malone has asked us to identify what each of our newspapers do in light of this call. And for the Register's part, we see a need to amplify an amplified need to continue to provide accurate, in-depth news and analysis for primarily the weekly Mass-going Catholic. So our audience is a very traditional Catholic most of the time, someone who is practicing their faith. But the current climate has also made us at the Register keenly aware that we're poised to provide depth for opinion makers as well. So we hope that the mainstream media might look to the Catholic press in general, but hopefully also the Register for a greater depth as they write their own stories, so we can hopefully inform the opinion makers themselves. We also see, through the interest in Pope Francis that many people, 60%, have, might wander over to our site out of curiosity about this church that Pope Francis leads. We are keenly aware of Pope Francis's call to go out to the periphery, and we hope that we will attract seekers who are interested in the church, and that we too might go out into the periphery and invite those who need the Catholic Church, who need the grace that can be provided, to come to the Register and to learn more. The Register's stated mission is to promote the new evangelization by selecting news at the intersection of faith and culture, analyzing that news in light of church teaching, and presenting it to active Catholics so that they can keep up with the culture. They can understand the culture, evaluate it, and also be able to actively engage it. We want to provide global coverage of the top stories of the day with commentary and analysis from a Catholic perspective. So that's not necessarily Catholic stories, but a commentary from a Catholic perspective on the news of the day. We seek to provide daily news and features that provide understanding of complex issues in light of the Catholic faith. We constantly ask the question, what does the Church and Catholic tradition bring to understanding the events, trends, culture, and society and entertainment of today? Our goal is to report in a documentary style. We don't aim to be a promotional arm of the Church or engage in advocacy journalism. We seek to provide reliable, honest, accurate, relevant, and timely reporting. From the earliest days of the Register, which was born out of the Denver Catholic Register, it was born in Denver, Colorado. From the earliest days of the Register, it was created to set the record straight. In the early 1900s, the Bishop of Denver was being slandered by a local periodical. And in order to combat those opinions that were out there by this independent periodical, he founded a newspaper, and that was the first Register. And several years later, the National Catholic Register came out of that. And the first editor of the National Catholic Register, Monsignor Matthew Smith, wrote this in the inaugural edition: "If you like a Catholic paper with snap, vigor, courage, here it is. If you like one that is easy to read, here it is. If you like that one that will always be loyal to the Church and has no selfish axe to grind, here it is." It's been many decades since the Register has been an official operation of a diocese, but it still takes the words of Monsignor Smith in the inaugural edition to heart, to produce news with snap, vigor, courage, that's easy to read, loyal to the Church, and with no axe to grind. We see our role as continuing to set the record straight as we seek to tell the story of the Church today, because too often that story is incomplete or inaccurate. What are some of the challenges and opportunities for Catholic journalists in the U.S. today? First of all, there are challenges that all journalists face related to the media landscape. With the accessibility of the internet, readers are presented with a smorgasbord of information, and it's easy to have information glut. The internet creates an atmosphere where everyone and anyone's voice can be heard, and that it's not always conducive to reliable, honest, accurate reporting. There's a lot of information presented on the internet as news that's not news, that isn't accurate and isn't subject to fact-checking, or that lacks the context and explanation provided by expert sources. On the web, everyone becomes an expert, even if there is no qualification involved, and that's a challenge. For Catholic journalists, this reality is a challenge and also an opportunity. The challenge is that the Catholic journalist who has a unique advantage in reporting the news of the Church because of his familiarity with the Church becomes simply one voice among many. The Catholic journalist's work can be lost in the plethora of voices. The opportunity is precisely that the knowledge of the Catholic journalist on the subject. A Catholic journalist can set apart his writing by demonstrating accuracy and knowledge, in-depth knowledge of the subject. But we must be quick, relevant, and truly able to provide new information or new context in order for that coverage to be complete. Another challenge, though, and a challenge in providing that new information and being quick, is that there are financial restraints. Most editorial boards and most editorial rooms don't have the financial means that secular newspapers do. And so therefore it's very difficult for us to provide that on-the-scene coverage that's so necessary in really telling the story. And also that's necessary in being very quick to report the story. So financial restraint is a big restraint. Another challenge, I think, is the atmosphere of the internet, the blogosphere, if you will. That that atmosphere is very contentious. It's very, very difficult to be charitable at all times in that atmosphere, because people yell at each other. The internet is really about yelling at each other in many respects. And that can really be a challenge. Monsignor Teague, in a report on Inter Mirifica last year, at the time of the anniversary, said, we constantly have to ask ourselves, what is our tone? What is our attitude? What is our approach? Are we looking to debate and to understand, or are we simply engaging in condemnation or criticism? The Register takes that question very seriously. We don't want to be an angry voice or a constantly critical voice. We seek to enter dialogue with charity and with joy, trusting the other person, trusting that they have goodwill as they enter the dialogue with us. Unfortunately, not everyone on our website or on anyone's website has that same attitude. And we've had writers in the past who don't want the com box open on their writing at the Register because of how angry that discussion in the com box can turn out. So that is a real challenge for us, but we are always trying to elevate the conversation. But perhaps I can turn now to perhaps the biggest opportunity, and I believe that is Pope Francis. Pope Francis, as I said, is popular. We can ride the wave of interest in Pope Francis and go deeper. We have to constantly be creative in finding ways to answer the Pope's call to go into the periphery. And we have to ask ourselves how we can reach beyond our typical coverage, how we can touch people where they are. Father Malone asked us to reflect on how we relate to the bishops and how we relate to the people of God. On that point, I'd like to quote something that I read from Greg Erlinson, who is the publisher of our Sunday Visitor. And he said this when he was the head of the Catholic Press Association in an address to the Pontifical Council for Catholic Communications. And Greg said, Catholic journalism should not view itself as the surly watchdog of church leaders. At the same time, it is not to be reduced to propaganda, a role that breaks trust with its readers and ultimately brings discredit to itself. So for my part, for the Register's part, I hope that bishops can depend on the Register to accurately put forward their point of view, to actively give account to the teaching authority of the Church. Yet the Register will also not ignore the problems or the tensions or the faults of the Church, of the institutional Church, but we will treat them in justice and in charity, always seeking the truth. I also hope for my fellow Catholics will be able to trust the Register, to tell a fair story, to be accurate, to tell the story warts and all, so that they can make their judgment. Yet they can also expect that the Register will be loyal to the Church teaching, and we will highlight in our coverage the hierarchical order inherent in the Church itself. Again, I agree with Greg Erlinson when he said, in short, Catholic journalists and the Catholic media must develop an ethos that is at once loyal, intelligent, and honest, dedicated first and foremost to the simple faith assertion that the truth will set us free. Consistently applied, these principles will assure Catholics that Catholic media can continue to be trusted to both report and teach. How do Catholic journalists and media outlets meet the twofold task of proclaiming the gospel while also providing fair and balanced news coverage? So how do we evangelize, and how do we also be fair and balanced? I think in this regard, a balance of perspective through qualified sources is important to reporting fairly. We can't be one-sided in the sources that we seek. We must give a fair voice to the various perspectives that are out there. That's the nature of reporting. If we are committed to the truth, then ultimately there's no conflict, though, between proclaiming the gospel and transparently and fairly presenting news and analysis. I think, though, it's also important, besides the particular balance that is required in reporting a particular story, in addition to that, there needs to be a balance of content overall in what our papers provide or what our websites provide. We have news that reports the challenge of religion in the public square. This is an area where the Register particularly seeks to cover. How is religion being challenged today in our secular culture? Especially as we become more secular as a culture as a whole, and that there no longer is a common moral framework. There are many, many challenges to religion in the public square. So we have lots of stories on that. But we don't want to remain there. We don't want to remain simply a paper that is reporting on so-called culture wars. We must also, in the words of Cardinal George when he was speaking about Catholic journalists, be committed to chronicling the operation of grace in the world today. So we are looking particularly for what the Church is doing that is positive, that is good, that is building up people in society. And also to cover the human interest of the Catholics, the sufferings and the joys of Catholics in the way they are engaging culture today. Pope Francis calls us beyond ideological divides. He calls us beyond this conservative or liberal framework, the right or the left. Whether we see ourselves in those terms or whether others define us that way, Pope Francis is constantly calling us to go beyond, to go deeper. He calls us, as Father Malone said, to self-respect, to self-reflect, to be open to the other as we engage in conversation, and also to go outside of our comfort zones. He invites us to participate anew in the mission of the Church. And what is that mission, as defined by Pope Francis? That is to be healers in the field hospital where souls are in dire need. We desire, as a Catholic newspaper, to enter that zone, to be a part of the field hospital, to be a part of bringing about healing to so much brokenness within the Church and so much brokenness in society. So I don't fear committing the journalistic sin of partiality by not adequately exemplifying the journalistic virtue of objectivity, although I am always on guard not to let political ideology or journalistic laziness seep into our pages. What I fear is failing to bring others to a better understanding of the Church, failing to invite others to Christ, to know Christ. If I fail to do those things in my efforts as a Catholic journalist, as an editor, then I fail to be a Catholic newspaper. I revisit as I conclude the words of the National Catholic Register's founding editor, Monsignor Smith, and I recommit the Register to produce news with snap, vigor, and courage that's easy to read, loyal to the Church, and with no selfish axe to grind. Thank you.